Hello, and thanks for clicking on the video. In today's video, I'm going to finish my book Nook project that I've been working on for the last few weeks. It all started in week 1 with this beholder miniature that I painted. In week 2, I painted this cool trio of characters. And in part 3, it was all about the main pieces of scenic terrain. This will be the last part of this little series, so in this video, I'm going to be finishing everything else. One glaring piece of the whole thing that I just haven't done yet is this big empty wooden book nook. So I'm going to need to spend some time bringing this to life and making this look as cool as all of the rest of things I've been painting over the past few weeks. I'm going to be using a lot of similar techniques to the techniques that I've been using in previous videos, especially things like the squig diorama. That means I'm going to be using cork sheet, lots of bark pieces, and some stone stuff as well. I'm down to my last cork sheet here, so I wanted to be careful and I wanted to mark things out to the exact sizes so that I didn't use any more than I needed to. And honestly, the easiest way to cut big cork pieces like this is just to use scissors. I wanted to create some elevation and to rise up the big archway piece a little bit so that at the front of the diorama book nook model thing, I could have some stepped terrain that moves upwards. Hopefully you'll see what I mean as I build up my layers here. Because I'm running low on cork, I used a load of my weird off-cut pieces that were all kinds of different shapes to fill in the gaps at the back because I know you'll never see it, it'll all be hidden under the archway piece. Just like this. This piece that you're looking at is the top of the book nook, and I plan to stick some stalactites to this. I painted them up in the last part. But before I go sticking anything down, it's time to make some terrain on this too. So in the same way that the bottom of the diorama was going to step up and move up in terrain, this one's going to move down. So we're going to build some layers and then we'll put some texture paste over the top of that later on. But first we'll do the structure. I thought shaping this with a gentle curve, almost like a semicircle, would help drive your eyes into the middle of the diorama a little bit. The plan was then to stick my stalactites on the top of those layers so that it feels more like a flowing of natural rocks rather than just two pieces stuck to the wood. I've shown pretty much all the other parts that I've bought for this project across the 3 other videos in this little series, but one thing I haven't shown are these rocks. These are rocks that I ordered and I got them because they're thin and they don't stick up too much. And I thought for the sides and the top and the walls and the bottom of this book nook, it would be really good to have thin rocks because I don't want them to stick out into the scene too much. So that's why I got those, and they'll help me to build up my rocky terrain across all of the sides of this nook. With all the structure of the cork sheet on the top, this is what it looked like, and it's almost ready to glue stuff on, but I'm going to have to do some fun work with texture pastes and some rocky pieces just to help make things look even more natural and organic. On the bottom side, I used a pen to mark around the miniatures where I'm going to shape my terrain. And putting those pieces back into place, you can now get an idea of how I'm going to get the terrain to look a bit more natural. While I had the marker pen to hand, I thought it would be a really good idea at this stage to draw around my miniatures so that I know where I'm going to be locking them into place. And I also thought, well, I should draw around the archway piece as well, because then I'll know exactly how I'm putting that into the diorama as well. This will just mean that when I glue other stuff down, I won't accidentally glue it where I intended to glue one of the miniatures or the big arch. I've found on the few projects I've been working on for this channel that doing this kind of planning really helps me to minimize the amount of mistakes I'm making. It was time to then glue the pieces down, and I used basing glue, which I think is mainly just PVA. With those pieces glued down, I began to look at rock placement and how I would arrange the various rock pieces around this part of the model. And here we'll go into some shaky lower cams so you can get an idea of what this scene's going to look like at the bottom at least. Next up, these big old empty sides of the book nook need some attention. So, I'm going to use cork to do a very similar thing on the sides. And this also includes using more pen marking to mark out rough shapes. And of course, more scissors to cut them out as well. And the plan is to stick these pieces to the sides of the book nook in order to give me something that I can stick other bits to. It's not going to give us the texture we want. I'm not going to try and texture with the cork this time on the sides, but I am going to use them for structure and for building up a bit of height on the sides. And here's a quick demonstration of the earliest stage of this. But then I had to make sure I built this up further so that I had more structure to play with and more different elevations to stick bits to. And in a very similar way to the squig diorama that I made before, I'm using bark pieces and rock pieces and slate pieces and some of those resin rocks that I showed earlier that I ordered. And I'm going to make a big wild hodgepodge of random texture and shapes that I'm hoping will look something like a cave wall. On the other side, I decided to do something slightly different, and that was I glued a piece of cork upright, so adjacent to the other piece. I didn't glue it on top to build structure. I mainly did this because I was running out of cork and I was scared that I would run out and not have any more and then I wouldn't be able to finish, or I'd have to wait for more cork to come and that would be a disaster. So I tried this instead, and then I tried to layer up all of my other pieces, and this is what the side looks like when its initial structure is finished. And then this is the other side with its structure done as well. Lots of glue, lots of sticking, lots of fun. I could just sort of zone out and mindlessly glue a load of things down. It was great. Straight edges to the cork sheets on the bottom were not going to give me the natural look that I desired, so I had to go in with some cutty tools and cut away all of the various sharp edges on the bottom here so that I had smoother rising terrain. When I had all four sides textured and structured up the way that I wanted them to be, I did a quick sort of assemble of everything just to see what it would look like at this stage, and this is what it looks like from the top. But once I put the top piece on and enclosed the whole thing, this is what it looked like. Darkness is definitely going to be my ally in this diorama because the shadows at the back of this book nook are going to hide all of the back areas where I haven't really done anything. And now it's time for texture paste. So much texture paste. More texture paste than I've used on any other project so far. I honestly thought I'd be using a whole tub or more of texture paste, but actually it was only like a third of the pot of texture paste. That's still more texture paste than I've used on anything else, and it took me a whole evening. I watched a stream, it was like 3 hours, and I basically just knocked this out in the whole time that I was watching that. So quite therapeutic and sort of mindless. But once I had it done, I then sprayed the whole thing, and I ran out of primer and had a bit of a nightmare with trying to sort out primers. But when I did that, it looked like this, and it was cool. And now the book nook doesn't match the painted archway, so this looks a bit weird. So I fixed that, and I fixed it by painting up all of the sides. This also took me a while, but I knew exactly how to paint this because I was going to paint it in the exact same way as I did the rocks in part 3. The specific paints, if you haven't seen that part, were Dubai Brown, Gobi Brown, and Eclipse Brown to make a really nice dark brown mix. Then I used Grey Brown from AK 3rd Gen and Rock Grey from AK 3rd Gen as highlight layers. I did one main thing differently on the sides of the book nook compared to the archway rocks that I painted in the last video, and that is I did a little bit less of an intense dry brush. It dawned on me that the cave should look dark, and so maybe going really bright with my rocks is not going to be a smart move. So I wanted to make it so that the highlights were brighter closer to the edge of the book nook, so closer to the part that's closest to you when you look at it. And then I hoped that I could make it look darker as it goes further in. I had so much texture across all the rocks, it was really easy to dry brush this and to pick out all of the sharp edges, and I had a lot of fun doing the dry brushing. I don't get to do much dry brushing because most things I paint don't really require it. They're either small single miniatures or anything. So this was a really nice way to go out of my comfort zone a little bit, try something I haven't done that much of. And I think the rocks are turning out pretty cool. They're not the centerpiece, so it doesn't matter too much if they're not the best rocks you've ever seen, but as long as they look convincingly rocky-ish, then I'm happy. Doing a comparison of the archway piece to the rocks I just dry brushed, I noticed my rocks were way too bright. And because I really like the darker effect of the walls, I wanted to match the rocks on the archway to those. So it was time to go back to those and make them darker. This is kind of rewriting what I did in the previous video, but the previous video is not wasted because if you were painting these rocks for an outside thing, then you could still totally paint them that way. It's just because I'm trying to make my styles match a bit more here with the walls and make it look like a dark, dingy cave, so that's why I've had to redo it. I think it's kind of normal when you're making a project like this with lots of different parts that sometimes when you pull them together, they don't quite match and you need to make them match. So that's what I was doing. And after I'd done a much lighter dry brush across the rocks, I actually went in with a brush and I began to add even darker shadows because I think the shadows were missing from it. And once I had the shadows and the softer dry brush, I think the piece looked a lot more in keeping with the walls. And if you don't believe me, here, I'll show you. They still stick out a bit more, but they're definitely closer and they are more of a prominent feature in the diorama, so I don't mind them attracting your attention a bit more if they're a little bit brighter overall. Luckily, I didn't forget to paint the bases of my miniatures. They needed to match, so they were the same paint colours, this time just applied with a brush. Although to get the dry brushy look of the rocks next to it, I did end up having to dry brush these bases a little bit because adding it with the brush, as you can see there, ended up with too patchier patterning. So here are the bases when I've dry brushed them and they look much better and they're all in keeping with the rocks around them now, which makes me very happy. While dealing with the rocks, I thought the stalactites should probably be a bit darker as well, get rid of some of the highlights that were really intense on these, because they're going to be a little bit further back in the diorama than I thought they would initially. Once again, just another change I had to make based on things coming together, no big deal, very easy to just go in and add some more midtones. One other thing that had been bothering me a little bit was the cape of the orc I painted in the second part, and I just wanted to darken it down a little bit. These very bright yellow highlights were just a little bit too yellow for me, and I wanted to bring them back to more of like a pale orange. It's a small change, but hopefully one that will be quite important because this character is right at the front of the book nook. So now I want to show you this. This is an AI generated image. Ooh, AI, I know, but I thought this would be a really good thing to stick to the back wall. Unfortunately, the very back of the book nook is something you're not really going to see a lot of, but I did want the archway to be some kind of portal to another realm, and to achieve that, I need another realm, and this was the easiest and fastest way for me to create one. But one thing I will say is, at a later date, I may go back in and freehand a painting of my own on the back of this. I'm going to make it so that that piece of paper with the picture on it is only sort of held in with blue tack so that I can take it out in the future and paint my own thing on there if I want to. The other aspect of the portal in the archway is having some kind of shine or glow to make it look like an actual portal. And to try and achieve that, I got some of these see-through plastic sheets and I began to experiment and play with the idea of how I would get this to look shiny like a portal. After some tricky sawing and some help from my resident DIY expert, I managed to cut out the middle of this plastic sheet so that the middle would still be nice and see-through. At the moment there's a weird tape over the edges, so I peeled that off to get the see-through plastic to be fully see-through. And my idea was that I was going to take this see-through plastic and start painting it. But first I had to find it because I swear when I put it down, I actually kind of lost where it was. It's almost invisible. I then foolishly lifted up a metallic medium bottle thinking that it was actually bold titanium white. And you're probably wondering, why am I going to paint transparent plastic? Like, surely I want it to be transparent, and this seems silly. And with hindsight, probably didn't really need plastic clear sheet for this. However, I did want to do a dotting effect that I saw online from some reference art, and I thought it would be really cool. So I did try and do that. And so there's a bit of transparency use here that you can see as I'm dotting away these little sparkling effects, which you don't really get to see in the final thing that well. So I don't know how worth it was, but I like that I did it. It was kind of cool. With all the white down, it was just a base coat so that I could cover it all with fluorescent magenta. This way, it would only take me 1 million coats of fluorescent magenta to get a solid color instead of 10 million. And after a while painting magenta, I finally decided to grab a really light pink and to start adding that around the edges. I actually decided rather than going to dark, going to lighter on the edges would be better. So I covered all of my dark areas in this light pink instead. It's difficult to see here on camera, but I did try to do a little bit of blending with a sort of middle tone between the fluorescent magenta and the light pink so that I had a bit more of a naturally blend. If I had an airbrush, I think this would have been a lot easier for me to blend and make look more sort of fuzzy and cool, but I don't have an airbrush, so couldn't do that yet. I think the portal's also going to be one of those parts I'll leave it so that I can remove though, and then in the future if I do get an airbrush and I want to fix it up or change it, I can do that. Here you can see that I've pinned the bottom of the archway. That's so that I don't have to glue it into place. Those pins will hold it into the cork without making it so that I have to commit. The main reason is so that I can access the back if I ever want to do this freehand that I mentioned before. Although I do kind of feel like Copilot did a really good job of generating this. Jumping forward in time a little bit, I wanted to show you how I ended up working out the portal. So here's the portal after the painting, attached to the back of the archway. It's kind of cool. It'll look cooler when it's actually in. There's the pins on the bottom that I mentioned before, there to help stick it down without sticking it down. And on the back here, I wanted to show that I made these 2 pins that come out of the back of the archway. And this allows me to slide on and off my portal, but also holds it in place so it won't rotate. This means if I ever want to upgrade my portal to Portal 2.0 in the future, I can totally do that. Also, because the back here wasn't exactly straight, this also allowed me to bend the plastic quite nicely around things, and so it just worked out well in the end. If you're quick, you can see the white circles I drew around the holes that I stick the pins on the bottom of the archway into. I had to do that, or otherwise I'd have no idea where those holes were. It would be really difficult to see them. And here's a little look at the back compartment when this was all put down with the 2 pins I showed earlier. As I mentioned, I wanted to stick the paper to the back wall, but I just wanted to do it with blue tack. I didn't need to do anything permanent here. Blue tack will be strong enough to hold this in place for as long as I need it to. Probably the most difficult part of this entire project was trying to get this beholder to stick to the archway. He is a chunky boy and he's quite heavy and full of resin, I think, so getting him to stay on this took a lot of patience and a bit of pinning, and I had to drill holes in the exact place of the pins. I couldn't drill them the way I wanted to, so I ended up having to try and line things up, and it was quite tricky. In the end, I got lucky, and you can see here, look, it goes in and it works, and with a bit of pushing and a bit of force, I could get it to stay, and then I had to hold it in place for what felt like 20 whole minutes until the super glue had set enough that it held itself up like this. And when I finally let go, I was so relieved. It was wonderful. So then I wanted to place the archway into the scene with the beholder on it so that I could begin placing all the other things on it too. The first of those is the cool wizard paladin man that I painted in the second episode. He now has his book, by the way, and I didn't actually show me painting that, but I did it in the same way as the other books in part 2. Then I glued into place the 2 heroes, and then also some little books and candle parts. I didn't end up using as many as I thought I would, so I've got a few spare. But now all I had to do was one secret thing and put the sides on, and it's time to do a big reveal of the final book nook. And for this nook, I thought I have to show it on an actual bookshelf. So you'll have to forgive the setup here because I don't really have the lights or the equipment to make this look good, but here is the book nook actually on a bookshelf amongst other books, like it's supposed to be. And what book nook would be complete without some extra special magic? That's right, the book nook glows, and I kept it a secret, but I have put a little LED in the back, which you can see here is just a simple LED that I've stuck to the back above the portal. And all I did was buy from Etsy a pre-made LED kit like this that has a battery holder and the LED itself, and you can just turn the switch to turn it on. So this is the end of the Book Nook series. I hope you like the Book Nook. I never would have made this if it wasn't for making videos here on YouTube. I never would have pushed myself to do something like this, so I'm so glad that I did. I think it looks really cool. I hope you like the project, and if you've watched only this video or all the videos, I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope you'll join me for future videos as well. See you next time.